Hi guys, how are you? The weather looks like it's going to be another decent day out there. I hope you guys are getting some sunshine. We are back with our Gordan Korman chapter book. We are on chapter 9. If you guys are at Rooney next year, this is in our Rooney library. If you're not, look on Scholastic. You guys can probably order this. A lot of your parents are probably ordering stuff off of Amazon. I'm sure you can find it there. The Hypnotists, if you are enjoying this book. All right, so chapter 9. Our friend Jax just found out that he has hypnotic powers. Learning you had mesmeric powers was one thing. Actually using them turned out to be quite another. Dr. Mako put Jax to work first thing Saturday morning in a room lab called Lab Number 2. The director sat him down at a small table opposite of a lady he introduced as Mrs. Park, not her real name. She was an institute volunteer, he explained, with no hypnotic powers of her own. In Jax's opinion, she didn't need any. Mrs. Park was a bear of a woman with lots of wrinkles on her forehead and a large, irregularly shaped mole directly above the bridge of her nose. It was against this formidable opponent that he began his career as a mindbender. "What do I do?" he asked. "When your moment is upon you, you'll know," Dr. Mako assured him. "Remember, your eyes are the instrument." So he stared, and Mrs. Park stared right back at him. She might not have been hypnotic, but she was plenty scary, glaring as if she was angry at him for wasting her time. He knew his focus should be her eyes, but his attention kept wandering to the mole, which bore an uncanny resemblance to the state of Texas lying on its side. 20 minutes later, he had experienced not even the slightest hint of the visions Dr. Mako assured him were evidence of a mesmeric connection. The director sat a short distance away, his expression impassive, as if he was losing patience. If he was losing patience with his newest pupil, he gave no indication. For the umpteenth time, Jack shifted his gaze off Texas and into the black circles of Mrs. Park's pupils. Who was he kidding? He was no mindbender. This was all a mistake. Just because Dr. Mako hung out with the celebrities didn't mean he couldn't be wrong about a guy. Jax had to face an indisputable fact. Whatever the reason for these strange visions, hypnotism wasn't one of them. At last he could bear it no longer. He broke away from Mrs. Park and turned to the director, begging to be released. "Perhaps it's time for a short break," Dr. Mako conceded. Jax fled. Before he left Lab 2, he distinctly heard Mrs. Park's grating voice. "I still get paid, don't I?" Failure. Total failure. Just when it looked like there was an explanation for all the weirdness in his life, he was right back to square one. He staggered into the bathroom. The sight of himself in the fluorescent lit mirror was shocking. His complexion was deathly pale and glistening with sweat, and his eyes the color of eggplant. "I can't do this," he exclaimed aloud, splashing water on his face. "Oh, well, I could have told you that." A stall door opened and out stepped Wilson, his grin full of malice. Jax was so shattered that he didn't even bother to defend himself. There was no defense. Wilson was an idiot, but he was right. "It's not your fault," the brawny hypno went on with false generosity. "Every random dork with a set of peepers has Mako running up the flag and declaring the next big thing. First time I saw you, I knew you were a zero." Jax had already figured out that he was a zero, but hearing it from Wilson threw him into a rage. "I'm on to you," he shot back. "You're scared to death that when the next big thing does come along, you'll be out on the street. Well, maybe it's not me, but that kid will be here sooner or later, and you're on borrowed time, same as I am." Wilson advanced a menacing step, his fist coming up. Jack stuck out his jaw in defense. Part of him knew that he had as much chance winning a fight against Wilson as he did of levitating. But the disaster in Lab 2 had given him a feeling that he had nothing to lose. It had made him reckless and brave. He would take a pounding in this brawl, but he was determined to put a few marks on Wilson before it was over. And then the door opened, and Dr. Mako was standing between them. He towered over Jax and was taller than Wilson, too. The confrontation was instantly diffused. "It isn't what it looks like," Jackson mumbled. "Excellent," the director approved, "because what it looks like is very, very bad. Now I'm sure your many talents are required somewhere else." Wilson beat a hasty retreat. "I'm sorry," Jax told the director. "I tried with that lady in there. I really did, but it's no use." Dr. Mako smiled thinly. "How odd that you know more or less after an hour Do you know more after less than an hour than I do after 20 years? I know when someone's not hypnotized, Jax reasoned, and she just isn't. This is not like chopping down a tree where a little more muscle will give you a better, faster result. You can't force this. Jax was growing desperate. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. The director was calm. When you hypnotize accidentally, it was completely without effort. It simply happened. You have to let this happen, too. Jax must have seemed defeated because Dr. Mako relented. Take a walk. Get some air. Empty your mind. Mrs. Park, Jax began, will wait for you. Take 15 minutes. We'll meet back in Lab 2. Out on East 65th Street, his hands jammed in his pockets, Jax tried a few more deep breaths. His lungs wouldn't fill and his mind wouldn't empty. His very inclination was to walk away and keep walking. To the subway, followed by home. Whatever was going on at Sienta had nothing to do with him. He had pressing issues in his life, his hallucinations, and the erratic behavior of the people around him. To obsess over this non-thing wasn't just crazy, it was wasting time that could have been spent solving real problems. He flopped down on a bench and tried to think of one good reason to return to Lab 2. Hey kid, got any spare change? Jax glanced up at the man who stood before him. He was unshaven and roughly dressed in a red and black lumber jacket. Although he didn't seem threatening, still Jack's instincts as a city kid told him not to engage with this stranger. Jax turned away. Sorry, mister. Come on. Well-heeled kid like you, help me out. It was a crowning glory of a really lousy morning. Failure at Sienta, and now he was going to have to abandon his bench to avoid a panhandler. He got up to leave, his eyes locking with the man as he rose. It was almost instantaneous. 1 minute he was glaring at the person who had interrupted his solitude, the next he was looking back at himself. A vision! According to Dr. Mako, this was a sign of hypnotism. If only there was some way to be sure. Your nose is itchy, Jack said tentatively. He watched with amazement as the panhandler scrubbed madly under his nostrils. It's better now. The scratching ceased. Sit down for a while. You're tired. The man took a seat on the bench. Jack felt a surge of excitement. He'd done it. He was a hypnotist. His one thought was to tell Dr. Mako. He started back to the building and then hesitated. Amid the thrill of success, something didn't sit well. This panhandler was still in his power. Jax was just a newbie to this. Who knew the signals he might be unknowingly giving off? The poor guy could step into traffic and get himself killed. I'm going to count to 3 and then you're going to wake up, okay? That made no sense. The panhandler wasn't even asleep. I mean, you'll stop being hypnotized. You'll feel great, really, and you'll remember to look after yourself and not do anything stupid. The city can be a tough place, you know. He had a sense that he was rambling, or something that other hypnos didn't do. The mesmeric commands he'd overheard from them had been simple and to the point. Well, good luck, mister. 1, 2, 3. And when he was certain his first true subject had come out of his trance and was relaxing happily on the bench, Jax raced across the street back to Sienta. Dr. Mako! His feet barely touched the floor as he made his way down the corridor, floating on air. Kendra Kendall poked her head out of the break room to see what was going on. Jax grasped her shoulders. I hypnotized somebody! She shook herself loose. That's the general idea around here, she said with a tolerant smile. Jack spotted the director outside Lab 2 and moved from Kira. Dr. Mako, you're not going to believe this. Some homeless guy hit me up for change and I hypnotized him. I let it happen, just like you said. The rector nodded. Are you ready to take this confidence to the lab? Jack's exhilaration faded somewhat at the thought of staring at Mrs. Park and Texas. But at this point, he was willing to follow Dr. Mako anywhere. Let's do it. She was still intimidating, and the Lone Star State was a definite distraction. He ignored the mole and focused on the eyes, trying to recapture his mindset outside on the bench. He hadn't been trying to hypnotize. Quite the opposite. He'd been conceding defeat, thinking about chucking the whole thing and going home. All he'd really wanted to do was be left alone by the panhandler, by Dr. Mako, and especially by the googly gook in his mind that his mind was serving up these days. And through his distracted thinking, there it was, a picture of himself in Lab 2 as seen through the eyes of Mrs. Park. He had her. He was a mind-bender after all. Victory, as sweet as any game-winning three-point shot. Most satisfying of all was the praise from the great man himself. Excellent work, Jackson. Although I should tell you that I'm not surprised. You have the gift, like generations of opuses before you. Congratulations. Jax beamed. Thanks, Dr. Mako. However, the director went on, his expression solemn, your developing talents belong not only to you, but to all humanity. You must never use it for personal gain, to exact revenge, or to take advantage of another. I'd never do anything like that, Dr. Mako cut him off. The temptations will be great. Even if you think your actions are harmless, you must not resort to hypnotism for frivolous or recreational purposes. This is our number one rule at Sienta, and it applies to all of us, myself included. This is a zero-tolerance policy. Violators will be expelled from the Institute, no exceptions. I understand. It was a sobering lecture, but nothing could have spoiled Jax's good mood. He had spent many days at the office at East 65th Street, yet this was the first time he felt like he truly belonged. He was on his way out, waiting for the elevator, when he came upon a sight that gave him even more to think about than his recent triumphs. Miss Samuel's office door was open a crack, and he could see someone in the visitor's chair, someone counting a handful of bills, someone in a red and black lumber jacket. So, this sounds like they may have sent the lumberjack out, or the homeless man out, to test the waters. All right, we're on to chapter 10. I hope you guys have a great day. If you have been following along, last week my phone died. I have a new one. Yay. But I was behind 3 days, so I will be coming back and reading chapter 10 later on today. All right. Bye.